Okay, so I'm going to talk about making selections, and this is part of a selection and masking tutorial that I'm going to break up into a couple parts, I think. Making selection obviously is very important in working in Photoshop. You don't always want to apply changes to the entire image, and sometimes you need to erase or retouch or any of these things that Photoshop is really good at. You need to make selections, and there are, I don't know, a dozen different ways to make selections in Photoshop, most of which I wouldn't recommend using. I tell my students, forget about it. All of the rest of it's junk. It's garbage. There's only one good way of making selections in Photoshop, and we can skip everything else. So let's get down to it. My technique for working with selections in Photoshop involves quick masks. So get used to looking down here in this spot for this icon that looks like a rectangle with a circle inside of it. It's right below the color palette in the toolbox, and that's the quick mask mode. So when you activate it, the box looks like it's, when you hover over it, the box is in red and the circle stays in white. Now I'm working in Photoshop CS5, but this is exactly the same as in Photoshop CS6. So everything I talk about is universally applicable. Whenever you're working in quick mask mode, you want to make sure that you have black and white set here in these two colors. The easiest way to get that is as these are default colors, click on the default setting right there. Let's see, yes. And notice that you can use this icon to switch between the two. Okay, so that loads the defaults and those switch between the two. Very important to realize that. When working in quick mask mode, we paint on the quick mask using a paintbrush. So select the paintbrush and then go up to your paintbrush options, and I'm going to select, to start, the second brush selection. So it's the second circle there. That's a hard edged brush. And make sure your opacity is set to 100, your flow is set to 100. We want this to be a nice dark thing. And we're going to need a nice big brush. So I'll hold down the Control and the Option key and drag. If you drag to the right and left, that changes the size. Up and down changes the hardness. Again, we want a really hard brush. I'm going to do a large hard brush, and with the black color selected, I'm going to paint on to the quick mask. And you can see this is painting in red, even though I have the black color selected. This red isn't actually any kind of color. It's just telling me where the mask is. Okay. Now you can switch to the white color. I'm going to switch to the foreground and background, and that has the effect of erasing. So I want to get selection. I want to get the mask painted in there fairly close. This is a picture of me, by the way, not because I have any sort of ego or think I'm all that great looking. It's just that I don't have to worry about the model asking me for money. Okay, so you just really quickly make a selection that gets you somewhat close to the edge of your model, and not too far. When you're working with masks, you're going to find that you're switching between the white and black, the foreground and background color a lot. The quickest way to do that is by pressing the X key on the keyboard. If you look over here and I'm pressing the X key, it switches between those two. So when you have white selected, again, you are effectively erasing the mask. And there we go. So when you have the rough selection made, and I use the word selection, I talk about selection in quick mask mode. The difference between selection and quick mask is nothing. There's no difference. Selection is a quick mask, is a selection. So it's just a matter of what mode you're in. When I switch out of quick mask mode, you see I've got the marching ants to indicate the area that is selected. Everything that is inside that was in the quick mask, it was transparent. You could see through it. That is what is selected. Everything that was painted with the mask, and that red color in the mask, is not selected, is deselected. So anything out here is not selected. Okay, so I've got the marching ants, and now I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer. Okay, and I want to select right up to the edge. Best way to do that is with the quick selection tool. So if you press and hold on the fourth icon down in the toolbox, you'll see that you have the option between Magic Wand and Quick Selection Tool. Magic Wand, again, is useless. Don't touch it ever. Quick Selection Tool is the one you want. And when you have that, I'm going to, again, this is another instance where there's a brush and you can hold down the Control and Option keys. So you see the circle indicating the area of the quick selection tool has a plus sign in it. That's because this option up here in the tool options, you have 3 different choices. You can either create a entirely new selection, you can add to the selection you have, or you can subtract from the selection you have. And I'm going to be in subtract mode. So now you see the circle has a minus sign inside of it. The way this works is to start outside the selection. So I'm going to start in the area that was masked in the quick mask mode, out here in the part that is not selected. I'm going to click and drag in towards my model's face. Notice that I'm not getting anywhere near, that circle should not get anywhere near the actual edge. I'm going to move the canvas by pressing the space bar key to get the hand tool, and then I can click and drag to move my canvas and move around here. Again, I'm just getting in close. I don't have to even get all that close in this particular case because I have a nice smooth background and a nice high contrast edge. And there we go. Now you'll see instances like this where the quick selection tool sometimes grabs too much. Okay, it's looking for contrast and edges is what it's doing. And sometimes it doesn't do a great job. So you need to add that back in. You can either go up here and switch the tool option and start this time inside of the model and move out towards the edge. Or when you are in that minus selection, you can press the shift key. When you hold down the shift key, that temporarily toggles it over to the plus mode. So that changes its mode. And then when I release the space bar, or the shift key, excuse me, it switches back to that minus. Alright, so I'm going to move down here. Alright, sometimes all of your little marching ants are going to disappear just like that. Let's see what happened. It just disappeared out of view. Now if you have something like this that's going to be a big pain in the butt to repair, then you can undo. So I'm going to do Command Z, and that changes my selection back to the way it was. Selecting is part of the undo history in Photoshop. Okay, back to the quick selection tool. And let's try it again. Now I'm just going to go a little bit slower. You'll see when you're using this that there's sometimes a undo there. Well, I'll talk about that in a second. What is happening here is that there's not enough contrast between the background and the shirt here. So we're just gonna leave that alone. When you have a problematic area like that, we'll come back to it in the next step, no problem. Okay. So it looks like I have pretty good selection here. It's pretty close, but I tell you, making a precise selection is so key in so many things in Photoshop. We really need to make sure that we are perfectly on top of it. So here's step 3. Step 1 was going into quick mask mode, making a rough selection. Step 2 was exiting quick mask mode and using the quick selection tool to refine our edge down there next to the subject. Step 3 is to return to quick mask mode, and you see now the red is all the way up there, except where we had that problem area down here. So if I zoom in, I'm just going to paint that in. I was painting the wrong color there. Okay, so here we are, and I've refined that selection area down there. I notice here that I've got a bit of a spot. Because you're in quick mask mode, you're going to see mistakes like that a lot easier than you're going to see the marching ants when you're in selection mode. So I'm going to paint with white over that and take care of that errant selection there. And once again, I can't say this often enough. There's no difference between a quick mask and a selection. They are exactly the same thing. So I return to click on the quick mask mode button, and there we see the marching ants, which is what you're used to seeing when we talk about selections. No different than the quick mask. It's just it's just the mode and how you're operating with it. So there we are. So here's a complete selection, and we can move on to talk about how to use a selection like this in another video. So thanks for watching. See you next time.